My name is Vanessa Carter, and I live in Austin, Texas. I grew up in a small, close-knit family, just me, my mom, and my younger brother. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. When I met Ethan in college, he seemed like the kind of man I'd always dreamed of, kind, charming, and ambitious. I fell hard and fast for him, and within a year, we were married. It didn't take long for me to realize that marrying Ethan also meant marrying into his family, particularly his mother, Linda. Linda was a force of nature, the kind of woman who walked into a room and instantly took control. She was well respected in her field, working as a high-ranking corporate executive, and she didn't hesitate to remind everyone of her success. From the very beginning, she made it clear she thought Ethan had settled beneath him by choosing me. Linda mocked everything about me, from my decision to work as a freelance artist to the way I decorated our home. "This looks like something a child would make," she once said, holding up a painting I had poured my heart into. Ethan would laugh nervously or stay silent, never defending me. "She's just like that," he'd say later when I was in tears, as though that excused her cruelty. The worst part was how Ethan seemed to idolize his mother. No matter what she said or did, he couldn't see her flaws. He sought her approval in everything, even in our marriage. I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to earn her respect while struggling to hold onto my own identity. Still, I told myself things would get better. I loved Ethan, and I believed he loved me too. But with Linda always hovering over us, criticizing me and dictating our lives, it became clear that I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. 3 years into our marriage, I still clung to the hope that things would get better. I had convinced myself that with time, Linda might warm up to me, or at the very least, Ethan might start putting us first. But that hope was like a threadbare blanket, fragile and full of holes. On the day of our 3rd wedding anniversary, I decided to keep things simple. I baked a cake from scratch, something I had loved doing since I was a teenager. It was chocolate, Ethan's favorite, with a layer of homemade frosting I perfected after countless attempts. I decorated the dining table with candles and flowers, hoping for a quiet celebration, just the two of us. Linda was working out of the city, which gave me some relief. Ethan came home from work that evening, and for a moment, it felt like everything might be okay. He smiled at the sight of the cake and kissed me on the forehead. We sat down together, and as I lit the candles, I silently wished for a better future, for love, for understanding, for something more than what we had. But just as I was about to cut the cake, the front door slammed open. Linda stormed in, her face a mask of fury. I froze, knife in hand, as she glared at me. "How dare you cut that cake without my permission?" she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Permission? This was my anniversary, my celebration with my husband. I looked at Ethan, expecting him to say something, anything to defend me. But instead, he stood up, his face pale and tense. "Linda, it's not a big deal," I started to say, but before I could finish, Ethan turned to me with a look I'll never forget. "Why do you always have to cause problems?" he snapped. And then, out of nowhere, he slapped me. The sting of his hand against my face was sharp and shocking, but it was nothing compared to the pain of his betrayal. I stumbled back, holding my cheek, my eyes filling with tears. Linda stood there, arms crossed, her expression smug. Ethan didn't stop there. He grabbed my arm and dragged me to the door, opening it wide. "You're nothing but trouble," he said, his voice cold and detached. "Get out." I stood on the doorstep, my heart shattered into pieces as he slammed the door in my face. The night was cold, but it couldn't compare to the chill I felt inside. I had given everything to this marriage, my love, my patience, my trust, and in one moment it was all thrown away. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, I wandered the streets in a daze, clutching my phone. I called a friend who lived across town, someone who had always told me I deserved better. That night, I showed up at her door, broken and defeated, but alive. It was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it at the time. As I sat on her couch, staring blankly at the slice of cake she had cut for me, I made myself a promise. I would never let anyone treat me like that again. It had been 4 years since I left Ethan and his mother behind, and my life had transformed in ways I never thought possible. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. I moved to Seattle, found a job that valued my creativity, and surrounded myself with people who celebrated my successes instead of tearing me down. My small apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, a space filled with warmth, laughter, and peace. That's why seeing Ethan standing by my car in the parking lot of my apartment building felt like a ghost had walked out of my past. He looked different, thinner, worn down, with shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. For a moment, I just stared, unsure if I was imagining things. But then he called my name. Vanessa, wait. I hesitated. 1,000 emotions surged through me all at once. Shock, anger, confusion. But there was no missing the desperation in his voice. Against my better judgment, I stopped. What are you doing here? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. I need to talk to you, he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. It's about my mom. She's not doing well. Linda. Of course it was about her. I should have walked away right then, but something in me needed to hear him out. Maybe it was closure I was seeking, or maybe it was the last remnants of guilt I hadn't fully let go of. Vanessa, he continued, his tone softening, she's sick. She lost her job a year ago because of her health, and I've been trying to take care of her. But I lost my job too. We're behind on rent, and I don't know what else to do. I stared at him stunned. The mighty Linda, who had always seemed untouchable, was now vulnerable, and Ethan, who had stood by her side, letting her tear me down, was now the one begging for help. So, what do you want from me? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside. I know things ended badly between us, he said, his eyes pleading. But you're doing well now. You've always been kind, Vanessa. I need a little help. Just enough to get back on my feet and take care of her. She's still my mom. Hearing him say those words made my stomach churn. Kind. That's what he thought of me, that I was kind enough to forget the years of pain, the insults, the betrayal. For a moment, guilt crept in. I remembered the nights I had prayed for someone to help me, to pull me out of the darkness. But then anger followed, sharp and searing. Where was this concern when I was the one suffering? Where was this desperation when his mother was mocking me, and he was standing silently by her side? Ethan, I said slowly, forcing myself to stay calm, do you remember our 3rd anniversary? He blinked, caught off guard by the question. What? Do you remember throwing me out of your house? Your house, I said, my voice growing firmer. Do you remember slapping me in front of her and letting her call me worthless? His face paled. Vanessa, that was years ago. I was under so much pressure. She what? Made you do it? Held a gun to your head? I interrupted, my voice sharp now. No, Ethan. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose her. And now you expect me to swoop in and save you both. She's sick, he said weakly, as if that would be enough to sway me. I'm sorry for her illness, I said, and I meant it. No one deserved to suffer like that. But pity didn't mean I owed them anything. But I'm not your safety net. I'm not your wife anymore. You made sure of that. His face twisted into something ugly then. You're really going to let us suffer? After everything we've been through, you're just going to turn your back? God, Vanessa, you're selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air for a moment before I burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. It was a bitter, ironic laugh that bubbled up from the deepest part of me. Selfish, I repeated, shaking my head. Ethan, do you even hear yourself? Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep because of you? How many times I begged you to stand up for me, only to be ignored? If protecting myself and my peace makes me selfish, then so be it. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop him. This conversation is over. I'm not helping you, and if you ever show up here again, I'll call the police. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding but my head held high. For the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing or compromising. I was standing up for myself, and it felt incredible. As I closed the door to my apartment behind me, I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Ethan and Linda were no longer my burden to bear. I was free, and I wasn't looking back. That evening, after Ethan's unexpected visit, I sat by my window with a cup of tea in hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The familiar ache of old wounds stirred within me, but it was quickly replaced by something stronger, relief. For years, I had let guilt, fear, and the weight of other people's expectations dictate my choices. I had spent so much time trying to prove my worth to people who were determined not to see it. But now, as the cool night air brushed against my face, I realized that chapter of my life was finally truly closed. The next morning, I met my best friend, Mia, at a cozy little cafe down the street. Mia had been my rock since I moved to Seattle, always cheering me on and reminding me of my strength. As we sipped our coffee, I told her about Ethan's visit. And then he called me selfish, I said, rolling my eyes. Mia nearly choked on her latte. Selfish? Oh, that's rich coming from him. We both burst out laughing, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of my past dragging me down. Instead, I felt proud of how far I had come, of the boundaries I had set, of the life I had built for myself. Later that afternoon, I headed to the community art center where I volunteered. Teaching art to kids had become one of the greatest joys of my life. Seeing their faces light up when they completed a project, hearing their laughter fill the room, it reminded me of why I had fallen in love with art in the first place. As I helped a little girl put the finishing touches on her painting, she looked up at me and said, "Miss Vanessa, you're the best." Her words warmed my heart, and I realized something important. This was my life now. A life filled with creativity, purpose, and love. Not the kind of love that demanded I shrink myself to fit into someone else's world, but the kind that allowed me to flourish as my true self. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my apartment. My friends gathered around the table, sharing stories, laughter, and a bottle of wine. The room was filled with warmth and light, a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive silence I had once endured in Ethan's home. As the night drew to a close, I stood by the window, looking out at the city once more. This time, I wasn't searching for answers or solace. I was simply savoring the peace I had earned, the life I had fought so hard to create. I wasn't just free from Ethan and Linda. I was free from the guilt, the self-doubt, and the need to prove myself to anyone but me. And in that freedom, I found the strength to keep moving forward, surrounded by love, laughter, and the endless possibilities of a brighter tomorrow.